Okay, good afternoon, ladies. Welcome to the Shakti Ma International Ladies Sangha. So Shakti Ma is a place where we care for everyone. It is a safe place where we can actually share our feelings, our emotions, share between us tools in order to get through the day-to-day challenges that we have. So I'm filling in for Suki Sarvakia, commonly named as Suki Bird, who is the director of Shakti Ma. My name is Susan, and my soul name is Ram Pratista. And so today we're joined by Kalanyana and Karuna Apsa. We are going to be looking in at the human planes of consciousness, and we're going to talk about or speak of or exchange on the topic of compassion. And at this point, Kala, would you like to maybe present yourself a little bit?
Yeah, I can do that. I'm from Denmark, but part of Mahashriya, I'm Dikshaka. And like Ram said, my name is Kalanyana, and I'm part of Shakti Ma, trying to help people help themselves, help people be the change they seek in a way. And it's part of what we're doing right now also. We're debating, discussing what to do when we feel certain things, and this topic is Karuna, compassion, and how to contemplate and actively actually respond to this. And I'll slowly leave it up to Karuna Apsa because she is very wise, and on top of that, her name is also carries some sort of aspect of this topic of today. So Karuna.
Thank you, Kala. Thank you. And welcome, Maribel. Today, the topic is about compassion. And once upon a time, and this is a true story, there was a princess who held the hand and shook the hand without any gloves on of an AIDS patient. This was during the AIDS pandemic, when we did not know anything about AIDS. Many people were very fearful, very frightened. Many people that probably we know watched their loved ones die. And when my neighbor died, the family said nothing about the illness. I don't know if it was shame. I don't know if they knew. But basically, the persons who did stay by bedsides and watch an AIDS patient die, they emaciated because there was no cure. And there was a lot of fear. So it is one of the most famous pictures of compassion. Princess Diana shaking the hands of an AIDS patient. And it was very public. And it was told afterwards by her son that she would often sneak off to the hospitals and comfort the patients without the cameras. So the royalty would pick a project, and she was very, very brave in what she did and how she did it. And she was a beloved, beloved princess. And during her time, she, in her one act, demonstrated to us compassion. So what is compassion and where does it come from? So to do that, let's talk about the Creator. We, the wise man, would contemplate and agree that there was something, and that something was a creator, and that something created something, and that something created had an interaction with the first and the second, the creator and the created. And that is the divine plane. Many people called it many things. El Padre, el Hijo, el Espíritu Santo, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost. The Kabbalists called it a Heye, Iya, Yahweh. And the Hindu, Brahma, Vishnu, Shiva, the Egyptians, Isis, Horus, Isis, Osiris, Horus. And it is said that God was split in many parts because to see him or understand him or contemplate him as one, it's impossible. So it is said that we individualized from this divine plane into the fourth plane. And that's the fourth plane of individuality. And if you could put a triangle with a bubble, and a bubble, the first, second, and the third plane, and the next bubble would be the fourth plane, and that would be our individualization. That is the plane of our soul or our spirit. The fourth, fifth, and the sixth is all about the soul, but I'm going to talk about the fourth. And that pillar, that Sifra, is a part of God that was filled with compassion, misericord, justice, and in Hesed, goodness. So that same Sifra, I'm going to talk about the seventh and skip the sixth and go to the seventh in the same pillar. The seventh plane is the sphere of charity and luxury. If compassion is about goodness, the opposite would be, or the sin would be, gluttony. And so in the second, the created, the fourth, no, it would be the 2, the 4, and the 7. And that is called the pillar of misericord. So in her charity, her soul in her human plane, which is the mental plane, she was able to, and I'm talking about Princess Di, in her time, overcome the fear, overcome the press, overcome all the untruths that we had about an illness. And one of them is that it was like contagious by skin contact. That was the main one. You know, like leprosy, it was transmittable by contact and people were fearful. So although she lived a royal life of luxury, she chose charity. And she did so, and she is the great pillar of compassion and misericord. And her son wrote that we owe each other at least a minimum of respect and compassion. And nobody owes anything, but we respect the liberty of others to evolve as they will. And then we also respect ourselves, that there is suffering. Sakyamuni Buddha in the Lotus Sutra, chapter 7, in the parable of the phantom city, described the 4 steps as this. Here, meaning here in this earth, is suffering. Here is the annihilation. Here is the origin of suffering. Let me start again. Here is suffering. Here is the origin of suffering. And here is the annihilation of suffering. And here is the path on the annihilation of suffering. So he discovered that and became awakened. And they called him the Buddha and no longer Sakyamuni. So when we're suffering, it is very difficult to understand what is dukkha. It is just a very mild irritation or suffering. And depending on our mental plane, our mental makeup, our social conditioning, our structures, our profession, our duties, we ignore a lot of time the suffering that we have. When we're tired, when we're hungry, when the kids are crying, when you're broke, when you've got a flat tire, when you this, when you're that, when you run out of gas, when something happens unexpected in this world, you're suffering. But we don't take a breath and say, I'm suffering. We cuss, we blame, we point fingers. If only, if only, if only. And so I'm going to talk about the 4 states of being and ask you to go ahead and participate in taking a breath and inhabiting our body, being present, and feeling in our abdomen, and being aware as the observer from this body. Breathe, inhabit, feel, observe, and be present. In the 4th plane, we have mental activity. We notice our mental activity sometimes when we go to sleep and we can't sleep, and your mind is just like a little gopher in a cage, and it's just running. And if you stop and think and you say, wow, that is like the 90th time I have thought about, he should have filled the gas tank. I wouldn't have suffered being late for my job interview. He should have filled the gas tank, you see? 90 times. Conditioning. Maybe he should have, could have, would have, but didn't. And ultimately, we're responsible for what we feel. Suffering. So our mental conditioning, our structures, especially now with social media, in the Sifra of Karuna, of compassion, there is some justice. And justice is things are as they are. And in justice, we're tempted with iniquity, which translates to wickedness. And we don't even do it. Now understand that we're doing it. When somebody falls, we laugh. But how many times do we go lend a hand to the person who fell? It's just human conditioning. And we grew up with comedy, slapstick, somebody falls, somebody gets bonked, somebody this, somebody that, and it's funny. So that's social conditioning. And rarely do we pay attention to how our social conditioning is. But Princess Di paid a lot of attention to her conditioning, especially in a palace full of rules. And she went out and held the hand of an AIDS-infected person in compassion, because it would have been safer to stay home in luxury. So she didn't buy into or didn't give into the fears, but made a conscious decision to make an act of compassion. So she understood the origin of suffering. Here we have an illness. It happens. It happens when nobody knows what it is, why it's here, how you cure it. And we blame the people who had it, but women, children, men all had it when it's all said and done. And it wiped out a lot of people. And there is the annihilation of suffering. Here is the annihilation of suffering. And she used her royalty. She used her charm, her beauty, everything that's God given to, that was created in that soul, to touch someone and to affect the world and say, look, we can touch, and it's not like leprosy. I will not get AIDS. And this from a person who came from a palace with every single rule and protocol that you can think of on how to behave. So we need to be aware of our conditioning and our structures and say, wow, what's going on inside me? when I'm suffering, and I quick reflex blame the other, because in our emotions, which is our belly here, is how we're made. That's the other brain. And the emotions, we're made as a good animal, attraction, repulsion. And in justice, there is also envy on the fourth Sifra. And envy means I want what you have. And many years ago, when we lived as clans, it was very necessary to look from one clan to another to see that they had water and you didn't, that they had fire and you didn't, they had food and you didn't, and you had to envy that and get that for yourself. It was necessary. We're built that way as good animals. And so Kala was commenting to me about forgiveness, and that's part of the Rishinaya, the road of the saint. That in these times where we're suffering, no matter how, to take a breath, to feel, inhabit our bodies, feel the emotion, and observe that I suffer when I run out of gas. And it takes 2 seconds to look at the gauge before I start the car. They all ding now, so you'll know. You have so many miles, you have so many kilometers, but back in the day, it wasn't so easy. So envy wasn't a bad thing. It's the way we're made. It's the animal. And in the emotional, that's the way we're made. To repulse or be attracted to something. That's the sphere, the 8th plane of anger that's buried, of fear that's buried. And so if we're by the side of the road without gas, because maybe the car dinged and we didn't pay attention, and we could get mad at ourselves, we could get furiously mad at ourselves as well, and angry as well with ourselves. It doesn't have to be directed to another person, but we need to breathe, and we need to forgive. And the forgiveness is in the throat chakra. Forgiveness is what? French, pardon, to give. Pardóname, to give to myself something, which is compassion. It's just compassion. And seeing how ridiculous it could be that you would be, we're all women in heels, dressed up, trying to find the nearest gas station, calling because we have phones and see who can help. And maybe having to walk if it doesn't work that way, maybe a few blocks. And walk back if we're by ourselves, a few blocks. And we can be forgiving and compassionate with ourselves and laugh. Because actually, some of our greatest sufferings one day will be the most funny moments in your life later. At the moment, it may not be. The AIDS is not funny, but for yourself, this dukkha, the small suffering, once your problem is resolved, and you see that, I made a mental mistake. I thought somebody else would take care of my gas. I thought I could make it another 2 blocks. I shouldn't postpone things. So in justice, things are just as they are. So that's in the emotional plane. In the vital plane, we have our will and determination. Without self-observation, Say, for instance, I would never dare think it was my job to put gas in a car, ever. That somebody else would do it for me, which is not true. But if I didn't, I would never have the will and determination inside of me to change a pattern inside of me on the ninth plane and live in a false hope, or maybe blame anything or anybody that they are not just, that they're not good to me, and I'm always having a bad day. Densifying, becoming hopeless. And the ninth plane is a vital, it's will and determination. So yeah, you had a bad day, you didn't die, you got your gas, you got on the road, you got the job. And then you make a mental note to yourself. Hey, I'm never, ever, ever in my life, ever again gonna drive without the meter at half tank. Ever. I don't care if I'm just going to the grocery store. It may be obsessive, crazy, or what, but you can relax with it too. You don't have to be a slave to that rule and say, okay, I'm close a little bit over. The next time I go out, it'll be prudent, which is on the eighth plane. It'll be prudent to do this. On the seventh, and so we don't get lazy. On the seventh and eighth plane. We get lazy by blaming. We get lazy by somebody else's problem. And we get lazy by ignoring. Oh, it's nothing. I'm used to it. I'm tough. It's just life. And eventually you'll really explode at something ridiculous. Ever happened to you? Where you just explode over nothing. You know, somebody moved your spaghetti. You know, that's what my daughter says. Somebody moved something that should have been there and it's not. Where is it? And you blow up. And it's not a big thing, but it's all that suppressed anger in the eighth plane. All that fear that you've lost your control, which we don't control anything. So on the seventh, on the eighth plane, it's the laziness and the prudence. On the ninth plane, it's hope and gluttony. If Princess D had stayed in her palace and said, well, I hope somebody figures it out. I hope somebody shakes the hand of that person so that I can make sure it's sure. And while I stay in luxury and gluttony, and it's all for me. So hope is to accept things as they are. And it's the beauty of God in the 10th plane, in our physical plane. In our physical plane, in the 10th plane is where things happen. It's the plane of dreams and where the outside reflects to us what's going on inside of us. And so to be compassionate beings, we need to accept that there is suffering here on this planet. And understand the origin of suffering. In this case, it would be not taking responsibility for filling up a car timely. That's it. And that would be the annihilation of suffering because you accept responsibility. And the next time something happens, you'll be on the path for the annihilation of suffering. And you will again look at yourself and see, what was that? What is this thing outside trying to tell me about myself? So I am going to turn it over to you all and whatever you want to discuss or ask questions about.
I have a question.
Yes.
I enjoy the fact that you chose Lady Di, because I enjoy this person and everything she did. So maybe I'm too much in my mental plane, and I was thinking that regarding the compassion, how is it compassionate? How is it per se compassion if she shook the hand of somebody who has AIDS? Was she before then prudent? I would guess yes. Did she inform herself on the effects or the physical touch of somebody? You know, like, did she get informed? And I would say she was very prudent. And I would say also that she was very loving, and that because she had children also to take care of. So how is it just per se compassion to do so as an act?
Because you have to look at the times. At the times, you're looking at it, it's like telling you, oh yeah, here's the kicker. Your car will tell you when to get gas.
Mm-hmm.
And you're like, how that's not even a good example. Because you see, I could have ignored that. But at the time, growing up with AIDS, and when it happened, there was a great fear and paranoia about the sick.
Mm-hmm.
And they were buried in shame. The people did not go see them. A lot of people that I knew that went to go see them, who were sick, were brave. And she was brave because she touched somebody with AIDS and said, look, this disease is not communicable by touch. And so with her royalty, she put a light on this disease and this fear and the darkness. And out of compassion, she said, look, we are suffering. Our families are suffering. Our friends are suffering because we don't understand that it's okay to come and see them at their bedside. So that was a great, great, great act of compassion, that she would be the one to go and spotlight that. And she brought in an end to suffering. An end to suffering that people that would say, and they could say, oh, now I can study that without fear of me dying. I can look for research. I can do things. I can go to hospitals. I can be there. And I can work with AIDS patients. The people that could help, helped. And the people who wanted to be close came close. She busted open that fear factor. Does that answer your question?
Very much. Thank you. Thank you.
And also, ladies, if I may add, we had a teacher when I was small, because this happened mainly in the 80s, right? This whole AIDS thing. And I think for 4 years or so, normal, clever doctors tried to say to people, this is not contagious by touch. This is a sexual transferred disease. This is not, you can touch people, you can hug them, you're not going to get affected. And nobody listened. And at my school, we had a teacher, I remember, and I remember my mother also hugging him and saying hello to him. And I remember even after doctors saying out in public, it's not contagious by touch, there were so many parents and, of course, children being afraid. So I think Lady Di was actually fantastic because she was a role model, right? One thing is my mother saying hello to my teacher and trying to talk to the other parents, but Lady Diana was some sort of role model. She could spread this message of try and pay attention to what is the facts also. That's also compassion from my mind, actually, paying attention and not letting this inner fear of, oh, whatever, shame also. What are the other people going to say if I touch the hand of some sort of not only homosexual, but whatever? There's something also about sexual diseases which we seem to fear or feared before, right?
Yes. Yes, yes. Very good. Maribel, un comentario.
No tengo por ahora.
Ahora no tiene.
Sí.
Gracias. So we do forgiveness to find the peace with ourselves. We forgive ourselves for judging the other, for being a good animal and being afraid on the survival, for anything that we ever did not to visit a family friend or somebody that's casual workplace acquaintance because of fear, if we could have. And also when we whispered about the neighbor who died and whispered that he died of AIDS as if it was a bad thing. It was a disease that took another person. And we forgive ourselves for laughing, for maybe saying it's only pertinent to them, or it only belongs to those people, or othering, and saying that I'm not part of here. Suffering is here. And so that's separation from others and separation also from the divine, because this is where everything is created and not to be in hope. So we forgive ourselves for those things and for not being aware, not being awakened, not knowing it, not believing, because we were good animals. We wanted to survive. And we only wanted to be with people like us who are healthy. And that was somebody else's problem until it hits home. And then the death is whispered. Until you ask somebody for their best friend that you met and they said they died of AIDS. Or you ask somebody else and you can see how it's evolving, and they said that they spent every evening with them at the hospital because their family abandoned them. And now it's not even a topic because we have the good medicine. So to your question, Ram, or to your comment, it led to that. There was an annihilation of that type of suffering. We found a cure. We found the medication. And they're on, those ads are on TV. If you watch TV, those ads are on next to your headache medication ads. It's become that common. And so that annihilation of that suffering, if we've gotten it globally, it benefits the world and it benefits everybody. So that is compassion. Do you have any more comments or questions?
I actually have one comment because I both made this social promos for Shakti Ma about Karuna, and I slowly realized more and more how active Karuna is, right? In this, how active it is.
Oh, active, yes.
Yeah, you can have some sort of pity. I slowly saw myself actually from the outside. I realized I quite often have pity for somebody, and it's not really compassion. It's my ego messing with me.
Yes.
Does it make sense? Yeah.
Yes.
And then I realized slowly that Karuna is also being brave and is acting. Can I do something? If I can do something, it's good. If I cannot do something, then maybe I should just do something else instead of telling the world I want to be good. I had this for a week now, this contemplations, which was actually quite interesting. And I realized that Karuna is also doing something active.
Yes, that brings goodness, because that is the Sifrat of God, that is goodness.
Yeah.
And the effect is goodness in the world. And why did the whole world cry when Princess died? Because she was beloved. She was filled with that goodness, because her acts brought that goodness, that Sifrat of God, and she was divine, and she was royal, a princess, and just radiated love and compassion. And it has the effect of being loving kindness, because I know we had been talking about loving ourselves, loving the other, and the effect would be to have love, kindness, or loving goodness.
But to to jump in where Kala, the comment of Kala, where there's an action, is that what I understood, Kala? There's also Karuna is also not acting, but having an action, doing something. Is that what I understood?
I remember researching Karuna and other form of, there's also loving kindness in Buddhism, right? Then there's Karuna. There's different kind of compassion. And Karuna is where you don't just sit and look at things and have compassion, but you actually try to remove suffering. Not in pity, not in praising, I'll do something, but actually try actively. Maybe nobody will hear what you do, but you try to remove as much as you can of suffering from yourself or other people. And actually it's a mirror, because it's as important to remove suffering from yourself as it is for other people. It's some sort of, so this I find interesting about Karuna, this to do something actually.
Yes, the path of the annihilation of suffering.
Exactly.
Because teaching others to take a breath, to inhabit, to feel, and to observe is powerful. To say, hey, well, if it was a teenage kid that ran out of gas, knowing, and they would feel horrible about that because they would lose something. And you would say, well, this is what happened, and you take it through your steps. And you take yourself through your steps until you say, I'm suffering because of this. And observing your ego. Because Princess Di didn't go stand next to a hospital bed and go, pat, you poor thing, you've got, or from a window saying, oh, look at this poor thing suffering from AIDS. Right? Big difference. There was no pity, like you say, Kala. And it is not pity, and it is not saving. And she didn't save anybody. She went to comfort them and say, hey, we're in this together in this world. You are suffering an illness. How are you feeling? And that was it. Yes, that action. That right action. Right action he was talking about the Eightfold Path. The right action. Correct speech. But where she didn't go there to try and save and, call the alarm or use her power in a way that would, castigate doctors, the medicals, or anybody in the world. She did a handshake, skin on skin.
Ahora pensaba algo de lo que están hablando.
I was thinking about something that you were talking about.
Siento algo como de, no sé si es algo como de tristeza, pero no en una, como negativo. Porque muchas veces creo que la compasión, cuando se confunde mucho en esta parte de ser un poco egoísta, o sea,
momento.
quizá creo...
Un momento. I was feeling inside. I was feeling a little bit of sadness, but not sadness in a negative way, but sadness in this way. Repite la última frase. No en el no del modo de que.
Creo que ya lo olvidé, sino que muchas veces se puede confundir la compasión con ser una persona egoísta.
Sometimes you can confuse compassion with being egoistical.
Porque es como ver las cosas como son, como de manera de ver las cosas realista.
It's like seeing
no de la
things
otra.
as they are and seeing things in reality and not.
No como pobrecito lo que pasó o creo que luego se tiende a confundir esta parte.
And not like and not like a poor you. Look at what happened to you, and it looks like sometimes we confuse these two parts. Sí, el modo que lo hizo ella no fue egoísta y no le dijo pobrecito. The way she did it was not from an egotistical point of view and not a poor you. So part of the path of the annihilation of suffering is right action. Parte del sendero de que se disuelva el sufrimiento es hacer un acto correcto. So, yeah. So, shall we call it a wrap?
I have another question or a comment if we still have time.
Yes, absolutely.
So just to jump in on what Maribel said, because that really touched me, what you said, Maribel, and I'm trying to question how to distinguish actually, or if you have a tool or a counsel on how to distinguish the right action, like if in a day-to-day manner, if I see somebody on the street, like a beggar, and I ask him, "Are you hungry?" and I give him food, is that right action or is that pity because he doesn't have food? If I see somebody that needs help and I help them, is it right action or it's not? Like how can we distinguish? I don't know if my question's clear, but
yes, it is.
Thank you.
And it is what Carla was talking about and Maribel was talking about. Compassion is to understand your suffering. That's first. And to see that others are suffering. So to understand that you're suffering is maybe a guilty action, a guilt that people are on the streets and you have luxury. You just came from a 5-star restaurant and you worked for it, you paid for it, or somebody paid for it, and you had a nice meal, and you see a contrast of a homeless person whose suffering is different from yours. You had a luxurious meal, you do it once in a long time, you don't do it every day, and you see a person. So your ego would say, oh, I have to compensate and feel guilty that the world will not love me because I had a luxurious meal, and this person here has now disappeared from my radar, and I should go give him food. You assume that person wanted food. But be ready for that person to throw the food on the ground and cuss you out because they wanted your money. And money for drugs. Or maybe not money for drugs, just money. Just to have money in his pocket. So that wouldn't be a right action. So it starts with inside, what you're feeling. But if you're on a campaign to go volunteer at a hunger group, and they need volunteers every day to join an organization to put food in a box for the people in a hurricane whose suffering in Mississippi you cannot possibly solve by your one hand, but everybody's hands together can help take away some of that suffering. And you wouldn't be doing it out of guilt. You wouldn't be doing it out of credit, because nobody's going to notice you. They need so much help that you're just going to be one hand in the millions and then just walk off. You see the difference in the feeling inside? So the check is inside. And for Maribel, it would say an answer to her question, which is very good. It may appear that you are not in compassion. You're in compassion with yourself because you feel guilt that you just had a luxurious meal, and therefore may want to give some of that food to that person who may not be hungry.
Thank you.
Did that answer your question?
Clearly, thank you.
Okay.
It's also, to wrap this up, it's what I got out of Karuna. Like I said before, that if you go into pity or your own savior, it's not Karuna. You're sort of straying on a different road. Karuna is looking at what can I do to reduce suffering. So for me, it was.
Go ahead.
For me, it was good contemplation the last couple of weeks actually about what is compassion. And when I dived deeper into the word Karuna, I realized this. I had this, we all have it in Shakti. Most healers has this savior problem. It's part of the business, or it's part of the makeup, I think, for most of us. And I realized more and more this, just to look at it, what can I do to reduce suffering? What can I actually do right now to do good?
Yeah, but here is suffering. It's a given that on this plane of existence, there is suffering.
Yeah.
And here is an origin of suffering. So we breathe and we become aware inside. And then here, there is the annihilation of suffering. And here we go on a path for the annihilation of suffering, and which is the 21 Mass and all the work that we do on understanding the 10 planes and the virtues and the sins of existence. And sin just means you missed your mark. It's an archery term, that you just missed your mark in your action. So we become forgiving if you've offered food or offered not what that other person to another, and have it thrown back at you. It's shocking. But that was not compassion. That was not understanding what was going on in yourself.
Well, to wrap it up, my understanding and what you clarified to me, Karuna, is the fact that it starts with me. It's not, oh, look at those homeless people. It's not that. It starts with me. And which brings in another perception of, the Buddha, when he says, compassion, it's not compassion if you're not in the equation. And I thank you for that. It was always a sight for me.
Yes. It's like developing yourself and then tempted to show off. The guy who learned how to walk on water, and he met Sakyamuni on the other side, and he said, it took me 20 years to learn how to do that. And he says, you could have paid 2 rupees, gotten a boat, and worked those 20 years on compassion instead of doing that. So like you say, you've been observing it for 2 weeks and you learn more and more and more. I actually wept, Maribel, when that thought came to me this morning about Princess Di holding the hand of that person. I just wept. I mean, I was in bed and I woke up, I was sleeping. Remember the world where things happen? I was in my bed thinking, I don't know, I just popped up and I just wept because it was so powerful of a thing that she did. And it just affected me like, wow, what an example. What an example to be awakened like that, to be doing that correct action at that time. Right now, it wouldn't matter. I mean, it would matter, but not have that impact. And maybe it would. You don't know. See, I'm even correcting myself.
No, and it's back to this definition of Karuna as something which is acting, right? Lady Diana was acting at a moment where everybody else was freezing in the fear and shame and whatever. She did something. That's Karuna for me.
Yes. And for me, it's apsa, and it's to move in compassion.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not always obvious. It takes patience to figure it out.
Yeah. Thank you, Karuna,
Thank
so
you,
much.
Karuna.
Thank you so much for
you.
being here.
Gracias, Karuna. Thank you.
Gracias, Maribel. Thank you, girls.
Thank you.
Ladies. Lady Sangha.
Thank you, ladies.
Thank you.
So our next event is April 16th for the Shakti Ma Sharing Wisdom. And so we'll be announcing it in our newsletter that should come out on April 1st. And we will have the announcements also on social media. So to follow us, and it is also in the website at www.shaktimaint.org.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Great.
Great. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Have a great day.
You too.
Thank you.
You too. Thank you. Bye.